Hello and welcome to the Insurance Apprentice. This week we continue our quest to find the ultimate ambassador of the insurance industry. I'm your host, Nontetsugo Mhlung. This episode is brought to you by Marsh, a global leader in insurance broking and risk management. In the past 4 weeks, we've seen tensions rise, ruthless eliminations and joyous celebrations. The journey presented by this competition is most certainly not an easy one. And while the remaining contestants have managed to stay in the running for the title, this is no time for them to relax. The Marsh task has a reputation of being ruthless, and this year is no different. Today, the contestants have one of two choices: go big or go home.
Last week was a bit of a tough week.
You will be delivering a presentation to present a workable solution.
If you didn't contribute enough, then you are likely to go home.
It was the task that I worked with my team the best.
From a legal perspective, there's obviously challenges with the introduction of the POPI Act.
The moment that stood out for me was definitely the elimination.
Who do you think in your group today was coasting?
I would have to say Marissa.
Elizabeth.
Mutsa Oka could have stepped forward, but there's that element of fear.
Marissa, the time with us ends here. Thank you.
It was really hard to watch.
I need to win it against the best in the industry.
And then there were 6.
Last week was tough. Yeah, I think the show got even more real.
Yeah.
Competition stepped up. Now that I know that the competition's got real and that I could go home at any stage, especially if it's perceived that I'm not contributing.
Last week was a bit cutting. To say Marissa's name, she's someone I've gotten very close with in the game. But it is a game, it is a competition, and so you have to dust yourself off. Although Marissa was extremely strong competition, my decision to name her was an objective assessment.
I guess the innovation aspect, we probably might have all gone a little overboard. Yeah. It wasn't something that was a favorite amongst the judges, so I feel like we do need that balance sometimes with these tasks.
Judges are really looking for their apprentice right now, so I'm not waiting until another episode to try to be the best.
Does it feel surreal that we're still here?
Super surreal.
Yeah, look at me now, fam. I wasn't supposed to be here, but look at me now. Yeah. I'm not here to fool around. I want to win this, make no mistake. I'm not here to take part, I'm here to take over.
Something I must give you kudos for is you sharing your personal story yesterday. I thought that was very brave.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we are in the industry and sometimes we also experience this, crime situations and fraudulent stuff. So, yeah. I don't feel like what happened in the elimination round last week has had any impact on me. I bring my best on a daily basis and that hasn't changed.
It's getting towards the pointy end now. As we know, this is the second last episode for us. And if you have any baggage left over from last week, it can really affect your
performance.
Of course.
We're now the top 6, so congrats. That's quite an accomplishment.
It's amazing.
But it doesn't stop here, does it? You just got to keep going and just keep going. On the back of the judges' feedback, we're not stepping up enough. So my kind of goal for today is to really try and step up to the best of my ability. Should we go do this?
Yes, let's go.
Get it done. All right, good luck.
Welcome back, contestants. You're all looking fairly well rested, which is good because I think today's task is going to challenge you and you're going to need some energy to get through it. Historically, Marsh has always provided us with one of the most difficult tasks during each season. So I don't think today is going to be any different, but we're very fortunate once again to have Marsh as a key sponsor, and Shivan Hutton is joining us also once again. Welcome back to the show. Appreciate you being here, Shivan.
Thanks, Simon. Nice to be back.
Over to you.
Welcome back, contestants, and nice to see you all. Climate change is a key risk issue that we all face globally. Your task is to advise your client on the impact of climate change and the potential exposure that they face when they're constructing two assets in South Africa and Botswana. You're required to go through a lot of information, as with all our tasks, come back to the client and present their potential exposure to future climate change risk. Good luck. We're looking forward to it. And we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Shivan. Knox, I think you've got some wise words this morning.
I don't know about wise, but I've got some words. You've all impressed the judges at some point. You really have. And I don't think that there's a challenge that this group isn't capable of tackling. So know that, go out there, put your best foot forward, and good luck for the day.
I'd also like to just remind you, this is the penultimate task of the competition. And if you've watched prior seasons, you'll also be aware of the fact that we don't go into that final task with a large group of contestants. Time doesn't allow for that. So if you don't bring your A game, you won't be here when we go on to the next task. All right, once again, you will be split into 2 teams. In team 1, we've got Rafilwe, Kyle, and Mutsa. And in team 2, we've got Elizabeth, Wayne, and Christopher. You don't need to choose a team leader, but do keep in mind what happened in the previous task. And you'll have some time to prepare, and then we'll see you back here to do your presentations and take Q&A. Good luck to you all. We'll see you shortly. You're dismissed.
Exhilarated, completely exhilarated. Today's task is exhilarating.
I'm feeling a little bit under pressure. We were given less time to do the task today. So yeah, it's definitely the pressure.
Has anyone completed reading that flood index?
I tried, but
not
as he
yet.
said, you just need to understand the numbers, so to speak, because you're gonna be using Botswana's numbers and you're gonna use South Africa's numbers, and you're gonna then compare them.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's quite intense.
So don't let it overwhelm you. So let's baby steps. Let's work on small parts of it.
Yeah.
So all of it's divided into the smallest of things.
I think my team members are we have different personalities. So it has been quite difficult working with them. And I think because of that, I've withdrawn.
Blaming your B game on someone else's personality is a little bit cheap, and I don't think it's fair.
So make a recommendation to your client of which country to build the facility in. So in the event that the client only made one investment for each scenario, you can assume that the opportunity in both countries. Please limit your presentation.
So the recommendation comes later.
Elizabeth has been a little bit withdrawn, I suppose, and has been focusing on just understanding what's happening in the project. So from a contribution point of view, I'm not sure that it matches to myself and Wayne.
I'm very slow for them, I can say that.
So we can actually look at the coastal aspect if it's increased compared to the inland aspect.
I think I'll need to.
Did you look at the average temperatures too?
I think eventually Mutsa did understand what we were trying to say and the direction we were headed in terms of the presentation.
How they calculated and what it's over.
I don't think I need to know that, do I? Because you're going to present on it.
We all need to know what it means.
Well, from what you've said, yeah.
Okay. So if you're comfortable, then you don't have to. That's up
basically, to you. I'll just want to focus on it. Wayne and Chris are taking the lead. I have different personalities to them. So they've basically overpowered me and I've let them take the lead.
Everything's in the brief. You just need to read it. If I acquire the knowledge and I read it, now I have to explain to you your part. I have to explain to you what you need to do. Is that me being overpowering or is that me being empowering?
Should a flood occur and there's an underground parking, you're risking that's additional risk for all the assets that are underground.
A consideration
for a more more prone area.
Pick one. Site 1 and Site 2 are both in South Africa. We still need to check Botswana.
No. This is our Botswana and South Africa comparison, and all three of us is going to need to speak on this because we need to make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
You ready? We've got this?
Yeah.
I think we do.
We just have to put our best foot forward.
Yeah.
Let's knock it out the park. Let's go.
Guys.
Come on.
I feel positive. I'm just going to present to the judges what I have, and let's see how it goes.
Okay, guys, time's up. We got what we got. Let's go conquer.
Yeah, all good.
Right, welcome back. All right, take it away.
Good afternoon, panel. Today we are here to present you with a couple of factual information as well as considerations into the building sites that you have preferred to pick. We understand that climate change is a prevalent issue not only in our country but also globally. We have seen a rising cost in catastrophe losses that affect large businesses. It affects us as insurers and individuals who have lost homes due to that result.
So where we are today in present day, Botswana currently has a rating for a hazard of 2 compared to South Africa of 3. And where we have the exposure, we have Botswana at 1 and South Africa at 5. Meaning at present day, it might seem more attractive to go into Botswana over South Africa. Going forward into 2030, which is in about 10 years' time, approximately, say 7, you have Botswana still at a hazard of 2, not increasing at all in terms of severity and likelihood, okay? Yet South Africa is at 3, same, staying at the severity and likelihood remaining the same. However, what you can see within a 7-year period and rising by just 1.5 degrees, you're looking at Botswana going from a 1 out of a 5 to a 5 out of a 5. Okay? Exceptionally drastic increase. As you can see, the one thing that I'd like to highlight from the numbers is that although South Africa might be up front at present day slightly higher risk of getting involved and building in South Africa, Botswana over time and over the ever-changing and ever-increasing climate and degrees sees a much more drastic increase in the exposure and hazard as opposed to South Africa.
Now, when we're looking at the 2 sites in terms of which sites should we take into consideration, we were looking at the main concern that was presented by the client, which was a flooding risk. So we looked at both sites. There's a high chance of thunderstorms and hail. So those 2, obviously, it matched on that. But I think one of the key considerations why we have chosen Site 1 is because of the fact that it is inland, 450 meters inland. It can also be built at an elevation. The temperature aspect compared to the 2, where Site 1 is about 24 degrees and Site 2 is 34 degrees, makes the exponential effects of climate change.
So what temperature is that? Average temperature?
Yes, it was average temperature, sorry. Makes the exponential effects of climate change higher at the higher temperature location, which was at the coastal site, which was Site 2. So for these considerations, we've recommended that the site that the client chooses is Site 1.
Thank you. Shivan?
Yeah, I think first question I've got is, or the last point that we made at the end of the brief was, really read into the brief and the task and come up with the answers. Do you think you've really understood the question? Within the task, which said you need to give a recommendation and a view on each of the scenarios, you've given a collective view around the 4 scenarios, as opposed to each piece and commentary and analysis around each of those different temperature rises. So you haven't gone into that detail. I feel like you've missed a point there. Missing the brief a little bit has been a consistent theme from what I hear. So I think that's been an issue, I would say.
The hazard level for Botswana appears to be lower than South Africa's generally.
Yes.
the exposure level is almost the same as South Africa. But you're saying that South Africa is a better risk than Botswana.
So what we noticed is the rate at which the exposure level is rising in Botswana is slightly higher than the level at which the exposure level is rising in South Africa. And from a client perspective, I think when a loss occurs, your exposure is really your main concern. So in the event, maybe using parametric modeling to look at potential losses, your exposure is what you're going to be concerned with.
So in the event that we curb, globally climate change somehow, and we remain with the present day, you guys have now advised us clients to build in a country with a higher exposure.
With the sole view of
and
loss.
higher hazard. So you've exposed them to more.
Yeah.
But that still doesn't make sense what you're saying, because even if it's 60 days or 60 years or 30 years or 10 years or whatever it may be, the exposure doesn't necessarily change higher, but the hazard is higher in South Africa.
But it's the predictability of it. That's how I feel. I feel as though
we believe it gets worse off as you go.
It's more volatile.
But it never exceeds
but never
what
worse
they have
than
in
the
South
other.
Africa.
Beg your pardon?
It will never exceed what we have in South Africa. That's the point that the judges are trying
But I
to
think looking at it from a climate change perspective, climate change is not going to be curbed overnight. And this is a long-term solution this is a long-term project that the client is embarking on. And we need to have a realistic long-term view of it.
So I think what you guys are trying to say is you're trying to eliminate volatility and uncertainty.
Correct.
I think that's the
Correct.
answer
That's
that
exactly
we would
it.
have liked to hear from you.
Again, on the choosing of the sites, you focused, I think, a lot on the physical location of the site. So low flood risk, you've explained that, elevation, you've explained that, temperature considerations. But within the brief, there was also information around construction elements that they could have undertaken, or we could undertake as a client. You haven't touched on that at all.
So there was elements in terms of there wasn't I can't remember the word but in terms of water supply, I think, but they do have quite a, or I can't remember what the brief said, but I think it was with regards to facilities, like water facilities and electric facilities. But there is a budget, about 8 million rand, that would go towards that.
I think we're going to have to draw a line under this. You guys are out of time. All right, thank you very much. Dismissed.
It didn't go according to plan.
I'm nervous.
It was tough. The presentation was tough. I think we presented well, but we missed the brief a little bit.
I'm gonna just try and trust my judgment today. I think I did okay. Good enough to go to the next round. I really hope so.
I feel defeated. I feel like that was my crash and burn moment. I definitely feel like I'm at risk to go home today.
Welcome back. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, panel. Fire, droughts, increasing temperatures and climate change have disrupted communities, countries and companies around the world. Therefore, no company is immune to climate change. Now, before you, we have compiled an index information taken from the Marsh Flood Risk Index program. Now, when we refer to hazard, we are referring to the threat of flooding based on severity and likelihood across varying increases in temperature over a 100-year period. Now, when we speak to exposure, we're talking about the percentage of humans as well as assets that are exposed to flooding. I'll now hand you over to my colleague.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, panel. I would like to explain to you what all this information means and what are the risks that we are facing when we are embarking on our building project. As the temperature is at present day, with the comparison between South Africa and Botswana, we can see that the chances of a hazard happening in Botswana is very low.
If it does happen, the exposure or the effect of it is basically non-existent. Although on the South African side, the probability of one happening is also very low, a little bit higher than the Botswana one. But as soon as that happens, the exposure is significantly higher. So if we should build in the present temperature, the Botswana side is much more viable. Should the temperature increase due to the rise in temperatures, on the Botswana side, we can see that the probability of the hazard stays the same as it is in present day, but the exposure increases significantly. It increases fivefold. That means that the chances are that 50% of the country would be of that country would be exposed to it and affected by it. In South Africa, it stays exactly the same. It means that a change in the infrastructure, a change in the temperature is not going to affect from present day. From current temperatures and with an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's not going to change much in the risk as it is there.
Based on the figures that we have on this board, what we have done to come up to a conclusive decision to our recommendation on which country should have our location is we have calculated the average score for the hazard and exposure happening in the two countries. What we have found out is the average score for hazard for South Africa is 3.25, exposure is 5.75, Botswana is 2.5, and exposure is 5.5. On this scoring, our decision obviously is to look at Botswana as our ideal location for our building. The insurance that we're thinking of putting in place to cover for this risk is the contractor's all risk insurance. Thank you.
Siobhan, it's your task, you may.
Thanks.
Fire at will.
Wayne, we've met before.
Yes, we have.
Is there a sense of deja vu?
Yes, very much so.
Let's hope there's a different result. You talked around the hazard and the exposure piece. First question I've got is, I think maybe I missed it, but did you clarify your kind of preference for the 1.5 and 3.5 degree changes?
At the start of the project, because it was going to take 12 months to build, we prefer Botswana as the initial location.
Yeah.
During the second year, we also prefer Botswana, although there is a big increase. I've got it. Although there's a big increase in the exposure, the severity and the chances of the floods happening is still lower than the South African side. If it increases by 2%, we need to then look at, then our suggestion
percent, or do you mean percent?
Sorry, 2 degrees, I apologize. 2 degrees. We need to then factor in the fact that South Africa is the better risk at that stage. And then on the 3.5 degree increase, the 3.5 degree increase, Botswana then becomes the better risk at that stage.
Elizabeth, I have a question for you. You just mentioned the insurance considerations and you mentioned CAR. Could you talk us through why that cover specifically?
Okay, so the reason why we chose the contractor's all risk is because this is a site, it's not a building yet. We're still going to be building the building is still going to be constructed. So the contractor's all risk is obviously going to cover any risk that happens whilst we are building our site.
And what happens after that? I mean, we asked you to consider the future risk for this client and specifically a 60-year period, and there was no mention what happens after.
Once the building has been completed, we can look at having an assets all risk policy. What that will do is it will provide cover to all our assets unless there is an exclusion in the policy. So all our equipment is going to be covered unless there is basically an exclusion in the policy.
Can you comment a little bit around the comparisons, in terms of the location comparisons between Site 1 and Site 2 for me, from a climate change standpoint? Yeah.
So Site 1 being inland and dovetailing of what Wayne has just indicated, there is a larger fire risk there. So in respect to Site 2, we saw the flood risks there. And in terms of recommendations, there is a budgetary sort of concession or allowance for levies to be built around the particular site, but that's a saving if you choose the
Site 1.
Site 1, there'll be a saving on the levies.
fire breaks are actually far cheaper to build.
So your recommendation is actually Site 1 and in Botswana, if you had to choose a country.
Oh, we can't have Site 2 in Botswana.
Yeah, true. Some tectonic shifting might be required.
Yeah.
But Botswana is your preferred country?
Element for the first part of the task.
Okay, your time is up. You're dismissed. Thank you.
I was intimidated by Shivan. He's a friendly guy, but he commands a lot of respect.
This task was not well within my scope of expertise, so it really pushed me to my limits.
It's each man for himself. So how each individual delivers their message is entirely up to them.
It was a big one. There was a lot of knowledge to be acquired. There was a lot of knowledge to be applied. And I just felt like mentally a little bit drained from that one.
Shivan, what did you think of it? Did you get out of this what you wanted to as the sponsor?
So when we set the brief and the task, I think we wanted three things to come out of it. I think to me, one group missed all three of those.
Following the presentation, it is a mixed bag of feelings. I don't think that we did a bad job.
There's an element of the brief that we missed, so obviously that's a big concern.
It's pretty inexcusable not to read the brief and, to at least have a stab at it. And it felt like one group did that today. They just kind of went into it, threw a couple of numbers out there, no explanation, didn't hit all the points, which was a bit disappointing.
I can understand the approach that they took, even though it wasn't exactly what was asked of them. I think it just came down to interpretation. But the point remains, it's not what was asked of them, really.
We were given less time today. What we presented in front of the judges was also us hearing it for the first time.
Are my expectations too high that in the penultimate task, I expect both teams to wow me, and for the decision to be like super difficult. And today, after the presentations, I was like, immediately, that.
Are we all in agreement that there's a clear winner?
Okay, well, let's test it. Your vote. Okay, same.
Okay. Same again.
Well, to be fair, I was more concerned about my performance, so I didn't really give more focus or attention on Chris and Wayne.
I'm very happy with how I presented, but there's elements of that come with correctness. So at this point, I'm not sure if I've done enough to stay in the competition.
Shivan, thanks again for your assistance today. I think it was a great task. Are you happy with that?
Simon, tough, but I think the right decision at the end. I just feel like there was an element of missing from the presentations. The part around the insurance never really came through for me.
Actually, you're right, Shivan, and it's been a personal pain point of mine because we've constantly been harping on about the fact that they aren't answering the brief fully. So
I'm in agreement. Welcome back, team. Before I hand over to Shivan, I think Knox has something to say.
Sure. It's going to be short and surprise, surprise, sweet from me today. Well done. There were individuals that definitely showed, visible growth for me today. And dare I say, some of you were stars, I think for the first time, I looked at you and I went, these people, or some of you, want to be the apprentice. And that definitely showed through, that competitive spirit, that competitive edge. And I was impressed by that. So well done for me. I'm sure my co-judges have more to share, so I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Knox. Shivan, just once again, thank you to Marsh. Marsh has really been one of those core supporters since we started with the show, and it's always good to have you back on. Your feedback?
Thanks, Simon, and thanks for having Marsh back on the Insurance Apprentice. So this year, the Marsh task has been around the key risk issue of climate change. One that is irreversible and an urgent issue, and one that impacts all of us around the globe. As part of the task, we were looking for three things: an understanding of the subject matter and the strength of analysis, responding to the brief, and the presentation skills that come out of it. And really, I thought one team had a much better grasp of all three of those aspects than the other team. But I've got a question. Wayne.
Yes, sir.
You seem like a glutton for punishment. You're back here to do this process all over again. What made you come back?
I felt like I had some unfinished business, and last year was my own hand was my undoing. And I like to challenge myself and to learn.
And what have you learned from this process? Or from last year's process, should I say?
From last year's process, I learned that decision making in crucial moments is very key.
Interesting. Tell me, do you think you're on the winning team or the losing team today?
So to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I'd like to believe that we are in the winning team. We did a lot of work, so I hope and I will pray that we're in the winning team.
Well, Wayne, you're actually lucky today because your team is the winning team, so you are all safe. And I want to congratulate you and the team in general. I thought the presentation was excellent. The delivery was great. And there was, as Shivan said, there was great a team dynamic there. Everybody kind of held their own, so well done to you. Of course, there's always a losing team. Mutsa, how do you think you did today?
I really wish I could have done a little bit better, especially given the fact that I was looking forward to the marsh task, and the concept around what we needed to do is things I find intriguing. But unfortunately, I think I felt a little bit unprepared. I needed a couple of more minutes to gather all my thoughts together.
Yeah, look, I was massively disappointed with the team presentation. I felt that the numbers didn't make sense to me. This is really, it's an existential issue that we're facing on the planet. And you talk about it like you're insuring somebody's car. You know, it's so matter of fact, you know, that this is how we're going to do it. Like I said, I wasn't grasping the way you presented the numbers. I had an idea in my mind, but the only thing that I could really grasp was that my own temperature was rising while I was listening to this thing. This task may have been a little easier than some of the ones we've had in years gone by. So there was actually no reason why you wouldn't have hit the mark. Of course, this is a thing that only two of you are going to have to think about, because one of you is definitely leaving us today. So the next person to be leaving the Insurance Apprentice 2023 is... Refilwe, the road ends here. You're dismissed. I hope you'll take that feedback on board, and well done to Christopher, Wayne and Elizabeth. I thought it was a really great presentation, good show, and we'll see you all in the next task. Thank you, you're dismissed.
I'm definitely disappointed. It would have been nice to carry on with the competition, but I guess it was just unfortunate.
There's no such thing as a sure thing in this competition, so you cannot for 1 second think that you are okay.
I was just not expecting it at all, and I think
I'm really proud of myself for taking this step. I don't think I would have entered anything like this. So I really stepped out of my comfort zone, but I'm really proud of myself.
I'll just have your attention, please. It's pretty unusual, but the sponsor has some unfinished business. There's an issue that hasn't been dealt with yet in the presentation. So I'm going to be calling you back into the judging area one by one.
So stand by for that.
Get some of this.
We didn't have a chance to celebrate our win, and that for me, it's like, you know, we worked so hard and now we have to go back in there and quite possibly we are losing someone else.
I was definitely still trying to get my emotions together and then got called back into the judging room.
You've presented on the risk identification and risk mitigation as a result of climate change. Please can you give us your thoughts on the insurance implications of increased flood risk as a consequence of climate change? You've got a minute.
Okay, perfect. So I think one of the first things is the cost of damage to assets. The flood damage is quite expensive. There is a supply chain shortage in South Africa in terms of materials, and so to fix properties takes much longer.
There's a higher probability of flooding happening in the two countries that we are presenting on. We need to have the right insurance in place to make sure that when the flood happens, we are able to get back to business in the most minimal time.
The more the risks continue to rise and the more the severity and the more the likelihood of floods happening and catastrophe losses happening, mean that not only do the costs increase, but also the reinsurance market capacity will reduce as well.
Flood risk presents a risk to the property insurance market. And where there is increase in flood risk, obviously from a cost perspective in terms of insurance claims, this becomes a challenge. As we consider climate change, obviously it's a slow process and it's important that organizations take the little steps that they can.
On an insurance perspective, it's causing reassurance to lose interest in our country, withdrawing their support and withdrawing their funding.
Thank you, Wayne. Your time is up. Thank you.
I wasn't done, but if your time's up, your time's up. I don't know if I had the opportunity to stick around.
I froze, pretty much. And it's not like it's stuff I don't know, but in that moment, I guess it just came so unexpected.
Well, those three candidates who responded to all the particular points that we were looking for, a couple of them weaker.
Two kind of fell apart.
Two kind of fell apart a little bit under the pressure. That's tough, it's challenging.
So in terms of the performance, right, I'm definite continuity from the consistency we saw from the candidates who did well in the previous part. And just a shocker from someone that you would have expected to do much better. And of course, I think we can agree that those two candidates are our bottom two today. And I think the decision lies between them.
So yeah, I think it's settled. We know who's leaving. Tough day today. Lots of unexpected things happening. Shivan, do you want to give your thoughts on what we just saw?
Thanks, Simon. Not so much thoughts, but I just want to give a few comments really more than anything else. Well done, everyone. That was incredibly tough. But I think resilience and thinking on your feet is something that we're looking for in the Insurance Apprentice. I think it's really important for me to say you should all be very proud of your efforts today and your achievements to date. You should be all proud of the fact that you're a credit to the industry. Well done.
I think that generally there was a grasp of the answers that we were looking for, certainly from three of you that are standing there right now. It is quite worrying that this question was actually in the material. So, you know, that you didn't think about it until if you only thought about it when you were standing in front of us, that in itself was a problem. So this was a pretty important part of the task, and it was kind of overlooked in the presentations. But our sponsor Shivan at Marsh basically saying, I really need an answer. I'd like to know about the insurance impact following this. And what we were really looking for was, what is the impact on the cost of insurance, on the coverage, and on the retentions in the industry. And we got what we were looking for generally from 3 of you, but from 2 of you, the mark was missed almost completely. We're going to be letting somebody go right now. So if I can ask Elizabeth and Mutsa to please step forward. Elizabeth, you rattled off a whole bunch of insurance covers. And Mutsa, you rattled off a whole lot of exposures that one expects from this increased risk of floods. Neither of those things were what we were really looking for. We actually had to get up and watch the footage of your presentations. And one of you, right at the beginning of your presentation, mentioned the increased cost of insurance. And that person who mentioned that is Mutsa. Mutsa, you're safe today, thanks to that last-minute recovery. Elizabeth, you've been a great competitor, but the road ends here for you. You're dismissed. All right, tough day, get some rest. We'll definitely see you back for the next task. I want to give a special thank you once again to Old Mutual Insure for giving us this great facility to film this season in. And of course, another thank you to Marsh and to Shivan for your time here today. Really appreciated.
Thanks, thank you.
And Knox, as always, thank you. And we'll see you all again in the next task. Thank you, you're dismissed.
I, for one, didn't expect I'll make it this far. So when he came in with an additional task, and then I'm like, okay, now you're taking my moment away from me. We just made it to the top 5. We're supposed to be celebrating this moment. And I just really baffled my answers through, so I didn't do well in that.
Even though you won, it could change in a heartbeat again now. So
yeah.
So it's short. Everything that happens is short-lived. Whether it was good or bad, it's short-lived. That's mentally tough to deal with.
Yeah.
It's been quite an interesting journey. It's been a great experience. I'm proud of how far I've come, and I've learned so much. And yeah, it's been great.
I think it's still taking some time to sink in that we've made it to the top 4. I mean, like every episode, like every week, we have to say goodbye to people who we've grown close to. That's not easy. Today was 2 again.
Awful way to go out of the competition, but it has to happen. Those are our 4 finalists.
It's anyone's game right now.
Yeah.
It really is.